Hello there, and we're glad that you're joining us here on the Citizens Chat Show. We're streaming on Civic Space TV via YouTube. I'm your host, Judith Atim, and it's always a pleasure to have you with us. Today on the show, we're discussing the continued detention of Dr. Kizza Besigye, and of course, by extension, all political prisoners. But also, we shall be discussing in the next session the issues that are defining the campaign trail. And as you can see in the studio, we're quite a lean team today. We have Dr. Sarah Bireete, Executive Director of the Center for Constitutional Governance. Missing last week, but happy to have her with us this week. Good afternoon, Dr. Sarah.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Judith, for welcoming me back to the show. Good afternoon, viewers.
We missed you last week. We also have Mr. Joseph Ochieno, political commentator and UPC Idelogue. Good afternoon, Joseph.
Good afternoon, Judith. Was I here last week?
Of course you were. Okay. Weren't you? You weren't with us the other week, but you were with us
when
last
Sarah's
week.
not here, I feel like there's an absence.
Yeah, indeed there was. We didn't have actually a female presence last week, but I'm glad to have you both. I know we're a lean team, but nonetheless, we have to move. It is still an interesting conversation that we must have, interesting and critical for our political and civic space. So just very quickly, as you all know, Dr. Kizza Besigye has now spent at least a year in detention. He's facing treason charges together with his colleague, Dr. Haj Obeid Lutale, but also there are countless other political prisoners being detained in various detention facilities. Bail applications for Dr. Besigye and his colleague, Lutale, have been denied repeatedly. And today on the show, we want to discuss this from a human rights and constitutional perspective. Is this a case of political persecution designed to silence voices of dissent? And also, how does Dr. Besigye's absence from the political scene impact the political space? Has it left a void or not? Has it altered the course of our opposition politics in this country? And at the regional level, how does this impact Uganda's standing or its commitment to regional protocols on governance and human rights? I'll start with you, Dr. Sarah Bireete. What does this protracted legal process that we've been seeing for several months now, especially for a high-profile political figure like Dr. Besigye, what does it signal about the state of rule of law and the principle of judicial independence in Uganda?
I think really our judiciary is at lowest. We generally have, in Besigye's case, you see several weaknesses in our governance. First of all is the space of shrinking civic space in East Africa, given that his arrest marked the abduction from Kenya to Uganda that did not follow international law, that did not follow regional bilateral extradition treaties, and neither did it respect the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, on provisions of how a global citizen can be deprived of their right to liberty. You have people abducted in an apartment where they had gone for a meeting, driven through the border with no passports, and they were missing for 2 to 3 days. The state without communicating to their family, next of kin, both states, in this case, Kenya and Uganda, until it was published as a rumor that Besigye is missing. And people were wondering how a person of Besigye's stature can just disappear in thin air. His passport and other belongings were awaiting in the room he had booked in Nairobi. And the function he had gone to attend was never attended. That was the book launch by Martha Karua. So that manner of arrest is a stark reminder of the shrinking civic space in East Africa. And quickly it has been followed before the anniversary with the abduction, reverse abduction of the 2 human rights defenders from Kenya, where the president proudly announced that he had them in a fridge for 38 days. So away from that, we saw the trial of Dr. Besigye in a military court. the rudimentary manner, and Joseph attended one of the sessions. It's now 1 year. So the manner of that chairman whose name was, whose acts were contradicting his name of freedom, and then he was presiding over impunity and abuse, and the arrest of Besigye's lawyers in court. Aaron Kizza had his own, ordeal in the same trial, trying to rescue his clients, where a lawyer becomes the next immediate prisoner. And later the defeat of the trial of civilians in the military courts in the Supreme Court in the famous Karazugurka case. But even after that landmark ruling, I think we've seen no arrests, no release. No release, no reliefs of all the civilians that were facing the now defunct court martial. They are still in jail after the collapse of those courts. And I don't think the new court system has been set up so far, given that it has to be professional in the amendment. So all that has happened in this time. And then the trial of Besigye in civilian courts after failure of release. The first bail application, when it was filed, the state rushed and they sanctioned his file to appear in Nakawa. And then, because that was an application for habeas corpus, and the state said no, then the next day is produced in a civilian court and charged. But on the several bail applications, the court has ruled that the applicants meet conditions of bail. Because as much as we say that bail is granted on the discretion of the presiding judicial officer, that presiding judicial officer his conduct or her conduct is governed by the bail regulations. And what do they say? Substantial sureties, a permanent place of a board, and a commitment that you will report to court. Sometimes you deposit passports, and you must have a reason why you need bail. And the reasons are adduced. These are advanced age citizens, and several reasons that they have been adducing. So court has been ruling that they meet conditions for
Bail.
but they are not granted. That is abuse of judicial power. Because if they meet conditions, why are you holding them? And then, of course, until the bail application process reached the mandatory bail requirement, and we saw the court applying strange mathematics, claiming that the days had not reached when the mandatory bail application was filed. Mandatory bail usually does not require even filing of, because it's automatic bail, does not even require filing of an application. Court decides that the time you've spent, you have free now to follow your case from home. That's why in local language they say, court emweyimiride. The court has stand surety, loose translation. So, but these citizens are not even qualified for that. And their case is not taking off. I don't even know whether government has ready people to testify.
What kind of precedent does this set in legal jurisprudence?
Well, we are at that stage where I think the president decides who should be in prison and who shouldn't. Because I have never seen such. I don't know. Maybe we can compare with the past dark days that I'm not fully aware of. But under the 1995 Constitution, this is the first time where the president decides how long you should stay in jail. And informally, people are saying that maybe about 6 years, because the president allegedly does not want Besigye around when the transition is taking place. So when you have, and you asked what implications does this have on the electoral election period we are in. It's not just Besigye in jail. All the people arrested in this period belonging to opposition have been denied bail. Waiswa Mfumbiro, Edo Mutwe, this lady who was sick,
Sauda
Madada, vomiting blood, going to court. This lady Olivia, the people arrested in Imbarara who were charged, spread around the country. Nebi Kasese, where you know, when you are arrested, there are two areas of jurisdiction. Either the area where you've been arrested or the area where the crime was
committed.
So now you pick people in Imbarara and you are spreading them countrywide. This one's charged in Moroto, this one's in Nebi, this one in Kaperebyongo, this one. The madness in the country. Even when we want to pretend that this is a peaceful campaign process, it's full of negative peace elements. Even as we talk, I think 32 people were arrested from Arua, NUP supporters. So when you look at the trajectory, weaponization of judiciary, because when you look at the promise in Article 126 of the Constitution, judicial power shall be exercised from the people in accordance with the values, wishes, and desires of the people. And the judiciary is independent, is not subject to any control. And all that promise, the promise of Article 50, that any citizen can go to court and demand for enforcement of fundamental rights and freedoms. And then you find that we are discussing this. And last, as I conclude, the presiding judge in the case, where there is a judicial complaint of misconduct, where there has been several applications for him to recuse himself from the case, and he insists that even when I have you are complaining about my judicial conduct because of perceived bias, I will not leave the file. And sometimes you wonder, what is it with the Justice Baguma and the Besigye file? Besigye was under Judith. We are committed to the International Crimes Division of High Court. But the file was hijacked and taken to a different division of court. They are not in a court where they were committed to. And then you wonder why. And the silence of the head of the judiciary, which adds into the conspiracy. So,
thank you. A little later, of course, I'd like us to also look at when the government spreads out political prisoners across the country, what exactly are they trying to achieve, or what are they afraid of? But we'll come to that later. Joseph, I want us to discuss the political vacuum, if any, that Dr. Besigye's physical absence from the political space or the political scene creates. How do you think the opposition in the absence of Dr. Besigye, who has for the last 2.5 decades been the face of resistance in the country, what does his physical absence mean for the opposition collectively in this country, especially in moments like this when we're heading into a general election?
It's a difficult question, but I think perhaps the nearer obvious response would be that perhaps a candidate Besigye would have ensured that a Besigye detained, a Besigye equivalent, whatever was going on, would have been one of the central campaign issues. I have expressed my frustrations about the absence of issues-based polity in this country generally, but also absence of issues-based campaigns. And of course, every time you say that, supporters of the existing political organizations that are lucky enough to have candidates for elections, I will tell you that we've got fantastic manifestos, and I think even here you go to the space to discuss manifestos of various political organizations. I'm not sure that those are the most important things. I think the most important things are the tone, context, and the manner in which the respective political leaders, in this case, with their political organizations, articulate the issues that most concern this country. And while we are concerned about economic issues, I was just telling you my own miseries at home about energy and power, and my other best telling me that we told you so. Don't be surprised that they'll be bringing back umeme and repaying back umeme 3 times the deal. No, it's not that. And whereas possibly I have several stories that we can come back to later on the question of fundamental rights of a political leader of the stature of Kizza Besigye, criminally abducted from a neighboring country and brought back through torture and the kind of experiences that Sarah refers. Sarah, in fact, the day I was in court was the day, very ironically, coincidentally, Aaron Kizza was
Arrested.
you call it arrest because I've said it on air, that Aaron Kizza really was
Brutalized, actually.
I think Aaron Kizza was assaulted by those guys there. I was there, and Martha Karua was telling another network the other day, Juliet, was extremely unfortunate because I was within, quite close to Martha, and you could see this visiting senior
Legal
stateswoman, in this crude military dungeon in Makindye, genuinely traumatized by whatever was going on. Because I don't think any of us thought something like this happening, meaning that possibly her presence and the other 2-3 colleagues of hers from other spaces were bound to be mitigations, would rather provide mitigating environment in which these guys would behave, and they didn't. So I think that tells you about the level of impunity, the extent of impunity, the extremes within which you're operating. And then when you ask me this, I wonder, are we a military state? Are we a military one-party dictatorship that I always knew we were? But even then, are we a military one-party dictatorship, which instead of being a military dictatorship with soldiers who've gone to law schools, and with soldiers who boast intellectualism, and with ministers who've got double degrees in law, it seems to be worse than Idi Amin. And why I'm suggesting so is that Amin did not boast democracy. Amin was a military man. He came overthrew the government, dissolved government, suspended parliament, I think the language they use, and the judiciary was basically all the other arms of government. So he ran as a military dictatorship. So basically, we all knew. So whatever they did, they did. Mm-hmm. But I think at some stage, I think you were asking Sarah something about precedents. We can't compare it with the meantime. Because in the meantime, with the exception of those people now disappearing, I actually don't know how anybody can pick a dramatic experience in which somebody would go through what the Besigye Idelogue have gone through. The only other time is the two Obote administrations, and then Mr. Museveni. Of course, the others, Lule was 68 days, Binaisa was a few months, and then Mwanga's was a few months, and then we had elections. I don't see anything close to this. Obote II administration in which we had war, and war which was being perpetuated by Enri in Luwero and in Kampala and throwing bombs. The people whom the government then would get, which we now know, were factually rebels committing treasonable acts. There are not many you'd line up, none. Then you go to Obote I. The most famous one, and you can imagine my difficulties, but I'm saying it with authority, that was the detention without trial. Mm. So sort of that is the scar on the UPC administration. Now, Judith, the detention without trial as applied was very specifically referred to the detention of ministers and particular individuals, senior ministers, who were related with a coup attempt and an assassination of the president, and turns out to be true. You see, now, I think one of those ministers later said that the kind of lifestyle they led in Luzira was one of a five-star hotel. It has been alleged, and there's one of the minister's daughters is a friend of mine, things like that. But was that liberty? Not at all. But you give context. So I just thought I would refer, and for very specific reasons for your viewers, meaning the nearest to the other end. The detention without trial is the incarceration of a person by the executive branch without a formal court process, charge or conviction. Okay? It's a form of administrative detention or preventative detention that is justified on the grounds of preventing future criminal acts rather than punishing past ones. I have wondered what it is, a threat that Besigye, possesses to the state, to NRA, and to the people of Uganda, thus far, including that time when he had this very terrible health worrying situations when we were told many times that people didn't believe that he would make it to the following day. And that is Besigye, then that is Haji Obeid, and then the hundreds of other Ugandans. And and we're going through an electoral process as if it's business as usual. As I said, for somebody like me who's campaigned hugely and who's committed my life, my everything, really to this, in the square, I genuinely did not believe that at any future stage, post-2021 crude elections, that will be facing this. But this is an election thing, but we also talk about Kizza Besigye. I don't know why Besigye should be subjected to what these guys are subject to. And we've said it, and I've said it again, that if Besigye has committed any particular offenses against the NRA state, Besigye is not necessarily my friend. He's, I'm saying it to make a point, yeah? Put it on the table. Let subject Besigye to the due process of the law. And if you actually find, Mr. NRA Museveni, I promise you, if you find that Besigye has committed a treasonable act or whatever, let him go through the formal process. If we find that the state of Uganda, that all the three of us massively love, we shall rally behind you and maybe even clap for you. Thank you for defending our country. But if not, for heaven's sake, let the guys go. But away from Besigye and Hajobe, it's unacceptable stuff that is going on here in Arua. The unacceptable, sticky, crude things that were happening in Kiruhura. The continuation of disappearance of people in their hundreds since the last elections. There is no comparison. Thankfully, you can't compare it any time, of what you can call past experiences. In the meantime, as I said, people faced it. And I remember telling some serious European diplomats, I'm sure intelligence was following that, look, Amin killed, but Amin did targeted killing. Indeed, he went including for communities, but he knew it was that. But this is the thing where you target water wells, you do whatever kind of stuff, you ban people in rail wagons, and then when now you reach a stage in which you want to show them, okay, we shall arrest you here, then you see these mass guys take them to prison cell in Gulu, prison cell in Akalama. I'm answering part of your question. What is it? Subjecting the Ugandans, to a state of terror in 2025, and you guys are boasting in suits claiming democracy. It's hypocrisy. It's terrible.
Wow. Okay. So, Sarah, I know you already gave examples of what's happening in the region, and of course how the abductions that we've seen, the examples that we've seen, the Kenyans who were abducted here. We had also activists abducted in Tanzania and tortured, Agatha and her colleague from Kenya, Boniface. We've seen also similar patterns happen. Tanzania also just went through an election recently in which the opposition figures did not appear on the ballot. Others one was detained. In neighboring South Sudan, our northern neighbor, we see also democracy in trial. Okay. When you see these kinds of things happening, I know we're discussing Dr. Kizza Besigye and his prolonged detention, but how do you think the region, the East African community views this? Is it business as usual? Do you think at the leadership level, at the highest political decision making across the region, they are simply not being good peers of each other and allowing these kinds of illegalities and abuses of freedoms and rights go unabated?
You see, the oldest statesman in the East African community is President Museveni, who is the third longest serving leader after Paul Biya and Ngwema. Then he's Museveni, then he's Sassou Nguesso. And these are the, I don't use the word dinosaurs, but these are the fourth longest serving leaders in Africa and the high ranking in the world. So if there was any peer leader that should demonstrate what leadership is about, ideally you would have Museveni. So the question that you should then ask is, has Mama Samia and President Ruto been good students of their peer leader? I think they have highly caught up. If you look at the impunity in
The first learners.
if you look at the massacre, the Tanzania massacre during elections of young people, the bodies being discovered, piled up in mortuary, it's unbelievable that you can find piles and piles of dead young people in government mortuaries. There are stories of burning youth in a cement factory, It's a horror movie. Mama Samia, the ICC should intervene. You can't abuse power to that extent that you go on the streets and kill people's children and then start laughing at their mourning parents on cameras and TVs bragging to be an elected leader. If you look at Kenya, the death, but I think there were about 32 during the Gen Z protests. But Tanzania, on the other hand, they are estimated at 3,000. With so many bodies missing, people discovering bodies on videos on social media, government in endless denials. And so when you look at this kind of leadership, on the other hand, you have South Sudan with the Salva Kiir. There's a time, about 10 years ago, I did post that it's difficult to trust a shabby-looking leader. But and I stand by it. I largely believe.
Sarah, you're compelling me to check my shoot.
I strongly believe that with public figures, what you see is what you get.
But somebody could equally be nicely clothed, nicely suited up, but behind there are equally some skeletons in their closets and lots of
we know no human being is perfect. But tell me any shabby-looking public figure that has performed wonderfully in public office. Give me just one name.
Welcome.
We knew when
the former Bolivian president, but anyway. With this one can, one dog. Okay.
Yeah, but he wasn't shabby looking.
Fair enough.
He was just, he wasn't shabby. But look at your prime minister in Britain. This guy with a permanent bad hair day.
Yeah.
He performed shabbily. I'm yet to see a shabby leader that puts up a smart performance in office. I am yet to see. And I'm challenging you to give me
Okay, withdraw. Okay.
So when you look at Salva Kiir, Mayati, that's his name. Oh my God. His appearance is as disastrous as his leadership. His first vice president in jail, a wife of the first vice president under house arrest, failure to implement the comprehensive peace agreement. You failed to conduct elections in your country 4 times. Illegitimate power. 4 times. You cannot organize an exercise of allowing people and doing simple mathematics as who should govern them. Why should you be in power? Look at his conduct. Look what is South Sudan and what has befallen that country. What you see is what you get. So you go to the extreme south, the Sudan, on the ground. On the ground. You go to DRC, there's that Doha agreement with the 2 protocols signed, 8 unsigned protocols. Will that peace process be different from what they've protracted previously? You have that protocol dealing with the nationalization of militias, local militias, and then extermination of foreign militias. Will it work? Why is DRC ungoverned since independence? It entered the one leg in the East African community. They can't pay. Most resource-rich country, they can't pay. One leg in SADC. All these countries have failed to act on DRC. So what peer leadership? But I want to get back to the question of why is it important for Besigye? Or what would have been different in this race? Besigye was holding conversations around establishing cooperation amongst opposition. And I think he would have played that kingmaker role in the elections to stabilize the opposition. And his absence indeed can be witnessed in the fractured opposition. You look at opposition in Uganda, it is stronghold. It's just opposition fighting opposition. You have the road mayor, Yasurukwago, opposition versus opposition.
Could you say that again, please? In Buganda.
In Buganda, it's just opposition fighting opposition. NRM is just quiet and watching opposition go after each other's neck. Instead of opposition sitting down, establishing a minimum cooperation aspects, counting where they have their strongholds and parading their troops. See, count the constituencies. Start from Chira, Semuju versus Musisi. It's a hopeless situation. I don't think that there is any other hopeless situation of opposition race than Buganda. Go to Masaka, Nupu versus Impuga. Go to Kampala, Barimwezo versus... So if you are a Ugandan there, out there, seeking change, what does a defeat of Barimwezo against Turkwago add to you? Zero. If you are in Chira, a Ugandan seeking change, what does a defeat of Semuju by Musisi add to you? Zero.
Busiro.
Go to Busiro. First of all, if I were really a citizen in Busiro, and if I understand the duties of an MP, I would never replace Segona with any other person. So you replace Segona with what's the other?
Walukaga.
Walukaga. I saw Warukaga's, and I'm sorry, it's sometimes highest qualification. He's a mature entry age certificate, trying to get an equivalent.
Seriously?
Yes. So why would I make such a replacement? Or what does a defeat of Warukaga and Segona add to the request for change? Zero. Instead, it weakens it. Because you have, I don't know, you are taking away your strength of registration. Go to Makinde West. Uganda to defeat this young sportsman, Alan Sewanyana. There are 23 contestants, 22 are opposition. So what is it? What is it?
What are they opposing?
What is the strategy of opposition in Uganda in this race? Zero. Zero. You can't make anything out of the game opposition is playing in this election.
So, Joseph, still back to the regional question. And Sarah put it very, very well. In summary, basically, we're having a crisis of leadership within the EAC and the Great Lakes region, by extension. So where does then this leave the region in terms of governance, in terms of leadership? Who is there to check the other?
There's nobody.
And then where does it leave the citizens of the East African community
you're on
then?
your own. Judith, the citizens of this country are on their own. In fact, at the conclusion, my earlier submission, I had something more to say, but I held back, in part because they might say that we seek sympathy, this panel. We discussed this before. Sometimes you wonder, is it worth it? Because we keep on songing and songing and songing, as the Ukelos would say. I'll take you back. When the Supreme Court ruled on the question of trial of civilians in military courts, Sarah and I were here, and I was celebrating. I said, yeah, victory, you know. So I was thinking about this earlier, and I said, Ochieno, you guys, you can waste time, man. But no, we're not wasting time. No, we're not wasting time. No, but we have said again and again and again, and in a way, it's in part what Sarah is saying. The citizens of this country, the citizens of this continent are on their own. Meaning, we need to very urgently rethink strategy. You get me? We need to rethink strategy. Once in a while, I think we need to forget about the idea that there are systems and institutions that will protect and guide you. And so we need to begin to think massively outside the box. What that takes, I genuinely don't know. The citizens of this country are on their own. My point is, there is no way in which Kizza Besigye should be spending 1 year under criminal detention, having been criminally abducted from Kenya, with his colleagues and the experience we've had, and it's business as usual. I'm repeating that. Number two, that is happening against the background of elections and against the background around which I was watching a clip earlier where Mr. Museveni in 1988 was boasting about, quote, past regimes. The poor guy really likes Obote's name, but Obote is a fantastic guy. You know, that, oh, this Obote is whatever kind of, you know, meaning this business about changing governments and things like that, and why don't you like competition by this? It can be a boring thing. And I'm saying, this Mr. Museveni then, and the Mr. Museveni of today, and some of the things that Sarah is saying. Now, broadly, quickly, this continent badly needs leadership. We don't. The African Union is dead. The East African community, particularly of the regional bodies, the worst is this one here. And amazingly, historically, we led the early East African community, Sarah, the first East African community, led on the continental body, and the continent was very proud that we're actually leading them towards a closer integration, and with the example that, as I said, the European Union picked up on. Why? Because if, like Sarah told you, how these guys are abducted from Kenya, and the Kenyan authorities, how the Agathas are criminally treated the way they were in Tanzania, and I know from some of their testimonies that it's still actually massively traumatized. And these are people who are experienced activists, you know? As I said, what about these others in the dungeons in Kampala and Nagalam and other places, you know? And then you talk about the story in South Sudan. But Sarah, you know, I'm told these not so perfectly dressed guys can have huge amount of dollars in hundreds of millions.
That's why they look shabby.
They pay in dollars. So point is, while all this is happening, these guys are busy doing exchanges of their businesses in dollars from Juba to Kampala to DR Congo to Reva, and then these other ones here. I'm told you sometimes go to State House, and then by the time you walk out, the Yoka boot is full and people are quiet. That is what's happening in this continent. And we're talking independence. Now, the problem for me is that I hit age. When by the time I hit 18, I was massively, madly Pan-Africanist. So these things genuinely torture me. Number two, I happen to have been unfortunately a victim of early NRA. Now the early NRA sends me to exile. Now linking my Pan-Africanism, linking my convictions on UPC, linking my convictions on Africa, and then linking my convictions around imperialism and knowing how these things work, I'm telling you, this East Africa you're talking about, we are being sucked by global powers that others, our founding independent parents, thought we were trying to put a stop. So whatever is happening, and that's what I'm trying to say, people are alone, and Africa sort of needs to wake up. And Sarah and I have been having some conversations recently. How do we regionalize this? How do we broaden these things beyond maybe East Africa? How do we genuinely Africanize this conversation? But unfortunately, in the absence of a big name, big leader, who is really this African big name who's going to bang the table? Because what's happened in Tanzania, I put a disclaimer. These are my sister parties, but I couldn't see what the CM is doing and say that, yes, I clap for you guys. You know, what happened with the Marikana massacre in South Africa was elsewhere. I simply said, no, this cannot happen with my colleagues. And this thing which is happening here, you know, so nobody can check Salva Kiir. Interestingly, if you see how Riek Machar is being treated, because sometimes you switch off. For those of us as activists, sometimes you compel yourself to switch off and to go to bed because you want to wake up
sober
the following day.
It's traumatizing.
And you see what's happening in South Sudan. And you see the South Sudan, the nation state that we know that all of us got ourselves committed to. And then you see in the streets of Kampala, one group of South Sudanese, excessively, crudely, sometimes illiterately rich, you know? And you see another lot. And you say, what basically is happening? So unfortunately, we are beginning to bore you a bit that I'm pushing this debate away from Besigye. But maybe turn it to an Africanist kind of madness show that we need to deal with. So, no, why wouldn't Congo, like Sarah is saying, why would Congo? And I'm saying this again, as I said,
just to correct you, we're not pushing the debate away from Besigye.
No, I'm not saying
Besigye is that lens. We are actually looking at this issue using Besigye as that anecdote to tell us the broader state of governance and rule of law and human rights across the region. So you're still on course, yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you. You know, Congo, and part of our problem, and you know, you guys, you watch us. Now I'm busting a bit. Because we guys, we know more than what we can say on air. So sometimes the extremes of knowledge is extremely frustrating. But most importantly, knowing what you know, and as Ochieno put up my hand, there's only so much I can do. The answer really lies onto political leaders locally, particularly in the opposition, if the democratic opposition that exists, that we up this debate. My view would have been, just like the other day, I was actually in some other program, and I was challenging NUP leaders, that really after your members have been beaten up, you know, the way they beaten the other day, and you wake up the following morning, and then you go campaigning as if it's business as usual, and people's sons and daughters are languishing in particular places. A senior NUP leader quite challenged and was saying, Joseph, what do we do? What is the alternative? Meaning that we're so desperate to go through this formal, quote, electoral process. And are we escorting Museveni, or are we hoping that we then go ahead and get a result? Now, even if we then go ahead and get a result, is it worth it? When I come back and Ochieno, I'm somebody who's so convinced that there is nobody's life that is worthy anything, and here we're talking about hundreds. I genuinely don't know. Do you know what, to conclude? I got some reports from DR Congo the other day. You know, those things that don't hit the headlines. You know, it is shocking. But who is going to deal with it? Like Obama said, this continent does not need strong leaders, needs strong institutions. Here in Uganda, How does somebody swear an oath of allegiance using a Bible or a Quran? And then you go and preside over these things, you know? And you go home with a conscience? My conclusion, a senior NRA person was with me on radio, and I think that time when Sarah was there, some radio program, some few years ago. This individual told me that after defending the indefensible on television somewhere, he went home and found his children waiting for him. And apparently his eldest child is a daughter is a doctor, young medical student at the time, or a doctor. How could you? How could we have been watching you? He said he nearly was locked out. So some food for thought. What is it? So that guy told us that. Oh, at least I don't know whether Sarah was there, but he was saying this is how much we suffer defending this indefensible. So I'm saying I hope common sense prevails. But if you're the daughter and young sons of that individual, plus daughters and sons of these people, I think you need to begin to say that even Ochieno is now saying in the early afternoon of his life, no, the future of this country and this continent lies in the hands of the people in the mornings of their lives. And I think we need to be doing a lot more. I've bored you. I've not given you a solution.
It's
but
fine.
Food for
it's
thought.
Food for thought. Yes, Sarah. Still, I still want to take this to the regional level. When you look at the EAC Secretariat and also regional parliamentary bodies like the East African Legislative Assembly, do you think they are really doing enough in as far as pushing member states to ensure that they stay true to the commitments that they signed up for in terms of upholding these protocols on good governance, human rights, and so on? Do you think they're actually doing their work, or they are giving us a
Has
roadie?
EAC ever had such a conversation? Is it just like a club of presidents? If you look at the EAC, the heart of the new community was supposed to be the principles of people-centered and private sector-led. I know that the East African Business Council is making some progress really, and there's the trend. But the people-centeredness in governance does not exist.
Except on paper.
Yeah, because who participates in the EAC forums? It's the technocrats, the ministries. Minister of this, minister of that, they take the agenda to the council. The parliament, ARA, we've been pushing that there should be direct elections, like in the EU parliament for accountability. But as of now, do people even know who represents them in the ARA parliament? Do they know the agenda and how it is set? No. Is there any accountability? Zero. When you look at the SG forum that is supposed to bring in civil society, they've been struggling toward one this year, and I know I'm the new president of the East Africa Civil Society Forum. And then he called the SG Forum in Dar es Salaam, in Arusha, after the massacre of elections. And we did hold an extraordinary council meeting and said that Tanzania is not favorable for people to come in. Previously, you were abducting activists. The next day, at that time, they were picking up Kenyans from hotels. Then a Kenyan phone, they were picking and people were disappearing. Third, we are seeing piled bodies from your hospitals. How do you host a forum in such a country? If ESC was fair and genuine, they would now be discussing an emergency seat for the East African community. Shift it from Mama Samia. How can Mama Samia host the headquarters of East African community and she's busy butchering children on the streets? How? Is that what the East African community is about? They would be now discussing emergency country host the East African instruments of the community. How should East Africans now go to Tanzania? Activists are kidnapped, tortured, they are still nursing wounds, others are disappeared, others are killed. How do you host our community? On the other hand, you see Uganda. You say Kenyans came here, I'm keeping them in the fridge. What integration are we talking about? Besigye goes to Kenya to attend a book launch. He comes back also in Museveni's fridge. So what integration are we talking about in this community? And I now will be speaking about these things in Addis at the East Africa Law Society Forum. We must question, what integration are we talking about? What is in this integration for the people? Away from the people, we have seen Kenyans and Tanzanians quarreling over chicken crossing borders, whose eggs have entered where. Now our president is quarreling over the ocean. What integration are we talking about? We need to unpack this integration. What is in it for the people? I don't see anything.
In 5 minutes, Joseph.
I'll do it in less.
What do you, still on the integration, I wanted to pick up from where Sarah left. What's in this integration for the people, in your opinion? Do we feel it? Do you feel it as a citizen of this region?
It is the most comical time for this region, to the extent that beyond what Sarah said, and I was just thinking again, that continue to play advantage. That in the days of my high school, the things that have happened around, nations would have been threatened. They would have threatened war with one another. They're very close, but the level of independence that I don't know of a Tanzanian president or even a crude Idi Amin president of Uganda who would be prepared to see Ugandan citizens, except those in exile fighting against him, being humiliated the way this is happening. So this one we must concede, therefore, that the issue is that the leaders of East Africa today have come together and formed a cabal amongst themselves against the peoples of this East Africa. And of course, we know some of them do these things in league with the foreign powers that exploit this country. Because that's the only way that which can be exploited.
In other words, the integration is just working for a select few, for an elite club.
Completely. To the extent that Mr. Museveni very embarrassingly talked about that ocean thing. I was in some space again where somebody was trying to explain away Mr. Museveni's thing. I find it completely unacceptable. Somebody who talks Pan-Africanism, and you talk about the ocean, my water, and you don't qualify it, because Museveni is not a stupid guy, You don't qualify it by saying that, no, this water belongs to us, me, because I'm also a fellow African. And that's why I'm saying we should, like Sarah say, we should integrate, So if we should speed up the process of East Africa becoming one country, I'd walk down the sea. Now, to the extent that he was referring, and I followed that bit of it, is the other day where he was trying to talk about that, the Navy, we don't have a Navy, because we don't have a sea. But you have Lake Victoria, which you part sold and sunk.
And many other lakes.
And many other lakes. And you don't have a Navy, and you're boasting about a Navy. When you killed our trains, you killed our buses, you killed our airlines, you killed our infrastructure, and you're boasting about a Navy. So the Navy, to a Pan-Africanist, is now the most important thing. And Museveni thinks that if he has access to the sea, we'll have a Navy. No, these guys are telling you that they're pushing whatever agenda they're pushing is strategically to serve their interest and serve where they are, but not the African people. I think the urge for African integration should be much more urgent. But my worry is that, as I said, that I really don't see any face in Uganda today that talks and thinks that heavily, any face in Tanzania, any face in Kenya, or really across this continent, any face that I think like that. So since Sarah is traveling to Addis, maybe you'll bring for us a special breaking news of One Africa soon.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let's take a break, and then when we return in the next session, we now shift our focus to the campaign trail itself and the issues that are defining these campaigns. Will this be the same issues that will determine how Ugandans vote come January 2026? All this and more after the break.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media, or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Welcome back from the break, and we're glad that you're still with us here on the Citizens Chat Show. I'm your host, Judith Atim, once again, and we now continue with our conversation. And in the second session, we are shifting our focus to the campaign trail and the issues that are defining this campaign as we count down to the January 2026 election. So, Dr. Sarah Bireete, let me start with you. So, the constant questions of electoral integrity or violence in our elections, etc. What do you think are some of the key issues, in your opinion, from your observation over the last couple of weeks, that you think are dominating political discourse right now, that you also think might have a bearing on how people will vote come voting day?
First is the increasing trend of violence against opposition. The first month of campaigns seemed like peaceful. Second month, we started seeing raids in Irira, the Noop Hotel in Imbarara, now in Arua, blocking of roads, commotion, clash between police and the opposition supporters, until in Irira it led to arrest of so far 32. We have also seen arrests of major, strategic leaders of the National Unity Platform, including the security detail, the deputy spokesperson, and the lead of the Leadership Institute and others that are in jail and being denied bail and still stuck in jail. So that's one issue that is on the campaign trail. The second issue is the illegitimate leaders seeking to go through the electoral process unopposed. It started with the nominations, notably in Bokedea, Biende, and other areas, Kakumiro, the artificial unopposed candidates. After manipulating processes, whereas at nomination it was about staging roadblocks and kidnapping opponents, it has now gone to the level of manipulation of signatures, manipulation of academic documents, leaders seeking to go through without having passed the test of the voters. And they even have no idea that they will be illegitimate. You had a competitor, but you're trying to change your competitors through technical maneuvers. I don't know what has become of the leaders recently, because I think it would be a pride of every leader to be overwhelmingly voted by their members, which enables members to exercise their franchise as citizens, but also citizens to have a claim of legitimacy and authority from members. But when you start going through forms, this one with signatures, the dot is missing, the what, and that's your claim to a public office, I find it extremely disturbing. So we have that issue where apparently the competitor of Honorable Nyamutore missed, fell short of 2 signatures. The people who signed the claim they never signed. And I don't know whether the test on authenticity of signatures has fully been executed, because what authentifies a signature? It's a handwriting expert. If it's confirmed that that's your signature and trend of writing, then you explain whether your signature was obtained under duress or not. And people's signatures, especially voters, is contained in the NIRA system. So it will be easy to compare for the handwriting experts, and we get to know. So beyond that, we see Nisinjiro. Again, Honorable Ramirama pushing through maneuvers with his drivers and personal assistants, trying to shortchange his opponent. And apparently his opponent was disqualified on a wrong index number. We saw the press conference with his head teacher confirming that he was a student and the head teacher has his original certificate. And then UNEB getting a name which was under index number 047 and writing a disqualification letter quoting index number 048. And I don't know whether UNEB knows that they are being used to lose credibility as an institution. The credibility of education, of generations of Ugandans. And they are throwing it away at the handouts bribed by a few political leaders to shortchange their opponents and get through an electoral process illegitimately.
Sarah, if you don't mind, UNEB, Uganda National Examinations Board, was and should be one of the most untouchable bodies and organizations. And you guys know, and again, I'll take you back slightly to our early times. Any mention of UNEB is an enigma, authority, pride. Throughout my times, the idea that you've gone through exams and people are coming back, questioning results, whatever, no, intact, up to and including Idi Amin's time. UNEB, sorry, continue.
You know, now that you mentioned Idi Amin, under Idi Amin, there was an unwritten policy that you cannot touch education institutions.
Yes.
And even when I think one of the ministers attempted to get university students in a track, and for unofficial duties, the president then allegedly ordered him and said, how do you do that? Take them back. How do you touch, academic institutions? So you have this trend with weaknesses at the Electoral Commission. First of all, how did the Electoral Commission surrender its authority to these rogue politicians to stage roadblocks around nomination centers? And I don't think they've ever explained that. Like the events in Bukedea and other areas. Like, how could it be that people come for nomination and they meet a roadblock at the nomination center? Then now you come and you're alleging a signature scandal. The Electoral Commission signature scandal can be traced back to nomination of presidential candidates. When on the eve of nomination, yet they had enough time to verify documents. On the eve of nomination, they start sending funny letters. Your signatures are missing, your signatures, to all candidates, causing a fracas. And they were exposed with NUP, where a backdated certificate of nomination was later handed. That NUP had a certificate printed and handed. Then the next day, there is a letter saying the signatures are not adding up. And then later when they bring new signatures, you give them a backdated. What was that?
Yeah,
I think that's what exposed them. Of course, the other candidates that were again disadvantaged in that process of nomination, of signatures, now when they follow it up with using the same signatures to disqualify opponents of ministers in the government, it really looks shabby. The other issue that I could add on a campaign trail, of course, is the, again, complications surrounding the accreditation processes for observation. Apparently, the Electoral Commission is gazetting Kampala and Wakiso as areas where there shouldn't be any observation of elections. The communication given so far to accredited agencies shows that those who have applied to observe elections in Kampala and Wakiso are being told that they shouldn't observe those areas. And I'm saying this for citizens to watch out, that the Electoral Commission could be planning something funny in these areas. Because if an entity has applied for observation, and I've just withheld their names, and you've accepted to accredit them, they've put their choice areas of choice where they want to work, including Wakiso and Kampala, and you tell them, no, we don't want election observation in Kampala and Wakiso. What is the agenda of the Electoral Commission?
Thank you. But I would also like us to talk about the context within which our Electoral Commission operates and how this constrains or allows them to work. The political context, I must say. When you have a commission that is appointed by the head of state, you have officials in this institution or agency appointed by the head of state. And what does that do to their loyalty, okay? Is this an environment that actually enables the commission to function independently? And if not, how then do they push back and regain their independence in the context within which they're operating politically?
That's a question to me.
Yes, that's a question, but we'll come back to that later. So, Joseph,
If I were appointed in the Electoral Commission, first of all, the method of appointment is what we have available in our laws. Until it's changed, it's what it is. We want it changed, but there are no reforms taking place. So if I were appointed in the Electoral Commission, I would read my mandate in the Commission and the Electoral Commissions Act and do that mandate in accordance with the Constitution, because that's the oath they take. So for me, anybody who assumes an office and fails to do their mandate, they must be held accountable based on their failures, not hiding behind the process. We have had people before in these offices, starting with Stephen Akabwa. Fantastic job. I think that was one of the most straightforward elections we had in the Museveni era. Fantastic. Akabwa, deputized by Aziz Kasuja. Fantastic job. The army steps in an electoral area, they send you one warning, you don't move, they cancel the election. Simple and clear. Implementing the electoral laws. After, of course, Stephen Akabwa, then Aziz Kasuja comes in. He tried his best because his performance is still considered stellar compared to people and what they are doing currently. So you, from there you move to Chugundu. We used to think Chugundu was not doing what is right until his predecessors came on the scene. And then Chugundu becomes a star. Because these people did not bungle the election. The same way the current office occupiers are bungling the electoral exercise.
But even then, Chugundu was heavily criticized, actually, for
That's what
not
I'm
doing
saying.
a very good job.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That we used to think Chugundu was a non-performer until his predecessors came. And then he became a star performer. Because they are doing much worse. Chugundu never denied any stakeholder from playing their roles in the elections. The current Electoral Commission, in the last elections, arrested CSO actors on the orders of the Vice Chair of the Commission. In this election, they've denied civil society to play a role. They are accrediting non-entities and non-NGOs 2 years old or before, most of them Ngongos. Let them publish their list of accredited NGOs. The country will be shocked if they know more than 10 entities on that list.
Well, thank you. Joseph, let me come to you on the issues defining the elections. And I think Sarah had already highlighted a lot of them. When you look at these kinds of machinations and maneuverings, right from, of course, obstacles, right from nomination of candidates to candidates who are, trying to, manipulate their way to be declared unopposed candidates in their constituencies just so that they can beat off competition, to the arrest and so on. When you have this caliber of politicians finding their way in spaces of political decision making, making policies for us and so on, what are the broader implications of this crop of people and the policies they'll make to the ordinary Ugandan?
I think I'll start with the pre-nomination process, and that is the signature politics. I was a party. I didn't return my signatures, but I suggest that as part of the future reforms, that we should revisit urgently the question of signatures, in part because of the anomalies Sarah refers, but in part because I think it's just an administrative logjam that is rather inconveniencing. You can't be a major established political party like NUP. You can't be a major established political party like UPC and not be expected in normal times to get those signatures. But that said, I'm not quite sure what it proves. You notice that around the time I was generally very confident that for me, I had the infrastructure to get the signatures within a reasonably short time, but many other people did not necessarily do. But locked into that is the politics of it, of what the Electoral Commission guys will not do. But away from what they did to NUP and the mathematics allegedly that was played around G. McKenna, that some of the issues were coming out, is the fact that I know a female candidate. And we have 8 candidates without, and there's no woman there. A female candidate, whom I actually helped in certain situations, but who alleges that her signatures, and Sarah, I don't think I've discussed this with you, her signatures were played around with, including that she may have been lured to try and bribe her way towards the process of signatures. Now that is not a particularly nice thing to the Electoral Commission. So if one bit of it is the bribe element and the other is the politics that we're trying to talk about, that you're using your power to screen through like Sarah's asking. So who really who polices this process that a signature that I picked, including with somebody's ID card and numbers in Gongera, and by the time the thing reaches Kampala, the person is a registered voter, not registered, kind of stuff. The scandal that took place with a fantastically young, beautiful lady, Nyamutora, I hope she joins UPC in future when NRA retires, in Nebi, what is it that ends up with this number 2, that you miss it by 2, yeah? It's definitely crude. So no, these are some of the reviews that need to be made. But back to the points about the appointment, Sarah is right. All of us, we are human beings. In any case, even soldiers that we expect and to be independent and non-partisan, there's no law that says that they cannot vote. So at the end of the day, if they're going to be voting, they'll be voting for somebody. So they have a political opinion. Mm-hmm. They'll have their own biases. They'll have their own prejudices. I've been a public servant in various capacities, different situations, and we've chaired panels of interviews and selections and all these things where prejudices do come in. Would normally come in if you want to put, but no. If you're a professional, you're a professional. You go through a process and you say, these are the guidelines and these are the rules, and you play by it. Now, interestingly, when appointments reach a stage in which you're possibly being appointed a district commissioner, an appointment of being appointed a head teacher of a school, these are positions of responsibilities for which your biases and prejudices should be left behind the door. So then when you come to a level of an electoral commission, granted at the moment, these are appointed positions, but surely you should just go ahead and play the game by the game. That is one of the reasons why it's important that people appointed these positions should be people with integrity, people of repute, and people who people know that, well, they've got a track record. Part of the concerns, and I think in one of these appointments, I think in one conversation we had around these issues, the last group of commissioners, where we all saw nothing else but a group of NRA cadres, where you have a particular position and you're known to be somebody who was involved in the crudeness about Besigye, you're involved in crudeness about, playing funny thing around crooked, judicial process as a magistrate. How do the citizens expect that, over a period of time, you have not changed, you have not maintained that position? So it's really about integrity, about public institutions. Now, finally, really for a president, if really, and we're discussing leadership earlier, if I look through the previous administrations, a president, by the time maybe they're appointing you a chairperson of an electoral commission, there should be an understanding that, well, you're somebody, who will be able to do these things without, prejudice, and to be as fair as possible, and to commit to public service and to give the name of the organization, in this case that you're serving, the good names. But likewise, when you come down, you should be able to throw away your everything else, whether you're a priest or a sheikh or an alhaj. The problem is that in Uganda, unfortunately, for the moment, we're operating as a one-party state, monolithic thing. Everything starts and ends with Mr. President. You know, and you and I know, and many of us know, friends of ours around these organizations who are very decent people. But when the push comes to the shove, it is really, what does they say? What will he say? Which direction will he go? I have met many of these other particular people, and then sometimes people's critical moment comes and they say, let me go and check. I've even got a case, my own case, which is 4.5 years in court, judicial review. I've had a conversation, not that I initiated, somebody meets you and get embarrassed, initiates, and then tell, oh, we checked whatever the other thing. What does the other side say?
So what I would also like us to talk about, beyond the things that have happened, the occurrences, which are still issues, but also the policy alternatives or alternative policy directions or thoughts that the different parties or political actors are selling to Ugandans. Do you think their messages are actually resonating with Ugandans? Or do you think all this the drama that characterizes the campaign tends to overshadow the messages that these politicians, let's say at the presidential level, the political contenders are actually selling to Ugandans, from Bobi Wine to President Museveni, to General Mugisha Muntu, to Nandela Mafabi. I think those are, for me, the top, really, the heavyweights in this campaign.
I want to discuss, because President Museveni has actually been sharing in his evening addresses, where he has unlimited media coverage by the national broadcaster, the issue of the Indian Ocean. It on first value, it sounds funny, but I think it's except he waged war. Other than threatening to fight, I think it's a legitimate issue that we should discuss. When you check the right of access to and from the sea for landlocked countries under international law, you find that the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS, enacted in 1982, provides that actually in its part 10 and Articles 124 to 132, that the right of access of landlocked states to and from the sea and freedom of transit. And it provides that the landlocked countries have the right to access the sea, key provisions at Article 125, the right of access and freedom of transit. Landlocked states have a right of access to and from the sea to exercise their rights under international law. It also includes freedom of transit through transit states by means of transport. Transit states must allow the on-agreed terms consistent with the mutual interest. And Article 127, no customs duties on transit, free zones and facilities. And you find that it's actually, and flag of vessels in landlocked states have a right to register ships and fly their own maritime flag. And this is the debate he was raising. But the way he brought it, in a way, provoked thoughts. With Kenya, of course, saying you can't fight us over the sea. And under customary international law, the same rights are provided for. But of course, they are then bilateral and regional treaties. For me, other than the UN Convention on the right of landlocked countries to the sea, I look at the failure of the ESC, and I know it started with that. This debate by President Museveni is a symptom of the failure of the East African economic integration agenda and the Common Markets Protocol. President Museveni has been at the forefront of fast-tracking the East African integration agenda. He's the elder statesman in the region. But to find him now alone on TV, lamenting about Kenya, Tanzania, and endless negotiations, it means the community is not working. Because if you have the Common Markets Protocol, we have now the African Continental Free Trade Area. These are the treaties that should provide for free movement of goods on the continent, including access to the sea and the ocean, on either side of the Indian or Atlantic Ocean, if you have ratified the African Continental Free Trade Area. Some countries, many of them signed up the African Continental Free Trade Area. But did they go to the extent of the required visa waivers? Kenya waived visas, but it's given, they pay on arrival. Rwanda, I think, has removed pay for all Africans. We have bilateral agreements. Apparently, Uganda has failed to conclude the process of visa waiver with South Africa for citizens. They only waived for people bearing official diplomats and left the ordinary people to
on
suffer
their own.
on their own. So you have these incomplete commitments that would open up the continent. Free movement of goods and services, as well as government, contingents. And the leaders are failing to do what they're supposed to do in the right spaces. And then you come to the media to threaten war, to threaten in things you have failed to do in your heads of state summits. That's what I depart from. But the debate on the right of access by landlocked countries, I think it's a good policy. I wish we had a presidential debate. And then we would test and see what are the views of the other opponents. Because
so in other words, you're saying you would actually like to see this issue captured as a more prominent part of national campaigns, like candidates would actually give us their views on the integration and so on, and things like at the regional level. Where do they see Uganda?
Presidential debate is very good because it tests in a leveled ground. It tests out the understanding of the candidates, nationally, regionally, positioning at international level. And when you are found wanting, then everybody's watching. You have nowhere to hide. You have nobody to assist. I think it's something that we should have had to benefit Ugandans, to see what is it that these leaders are bringing on the table. But on each of the manifestos, these manifestos usually are written for these candidates. Some of the people might not even know what is contained in their manifestos. So if somebody cannot explain the issues on the campaign trail, I assure I don't fall for the manifesto. It could be a technical document that they don't even understand.
Thank you. Joseph, your take on this Indian Ocean matter. What do you think?
I mean, all right, like as I said earlier, you see, we have to lament, man. like I said earlier, actually, Sarah's points.
I was seeing his body language.
Yes.
Yeah. So, no, it's possibly it's possibly the more reason why it's possibly the more reason why we should challenge Mr. Museveni getting over this. Interestingly, Mr. Museveni once upon a time told, I think the BBC or ITV, but one of those major networks, that he had never read the Geneva Convention was. And it was actually quite shocking that you're somebody who's been, you're seeking leadership, and by then I think he had already come into power and was saying that he never read the Geneva Convention was. Now, again, you can't be a Pan-Africanist. You can't be someone who's keen on regional integration, and you're not familiar with the very apparent global treaty on the provisions for landlocked nation states, which Uganda is, and you've been presiding over one for the last 40 years. I argued that amazingly, when Mr. Museveni brought this up, and I actually don't know why he did it, I'm still trying to establish why. Actually, if we're in a political environment in which we discuss real issues, like Sarah is saying, maybe you'd imagine that maybe he's trying to bolster his image as the big man Uganda nationalist, because threat of war usually rallies around the country and shows that you're a strong leader, and in many cases also rallies you on to dare your others and then raise issues to show that, well, you're prepared to stand for your people. On this, I actually don't know how much of it. In any case, I'm not sure what the real audience is. The real audience is really not the majority of the voters who will be going to vote. But I have not heard anywhere that Ugandans, the fact that we are landlocked, our territorial integrity is being threatened. I know we've had these cases where people have argued that when there are issues in Kenya, it will affect us and affect our oil supply and our general supplies. But granted, that would happen because we're landlocked anyway. And so the reality is possibly the more reason why we should be, one, pushing for integration, but two, pushing for strengthening of institutions. And in fact, where global treaties usually apply in nation states and communities that respect the international law, in the event that we went to war, say for argument's sake, with Kenya, they would be obliged not to say cut off, say things like oil supplies, key supplies, oil, fuel, and energy, things like that. So those are provided for. So I don't know why he did it from that perspective. In any case, as I said, I do not think it's the big thing. And if it's the big thing, the answer is not, lamentations and crying baby. The answer is actually being the big man, in this case, the big man in the room, to try and provide a solution. Providing solution is really on the push for regional integration and Pan-Africanism. But if you then go on to the question of campaigning and candidates and the big issues, unfortunately, I said at the beginning, in the gloomy manner in which security services throw word that you will not protect your votes, and rather you not be at the ballot post. By that, I saw one by, is it General Nalweso, where she says that, look, there's no food here. It's extremely patronizing coming from somebody like that, telling our voters against the background of the conversation we had much earlier. I have said that if such a word was to come, it should come from the Electoral Commission in the very least, or perhaps from the police, but not from the army. So what are we preparing for as a nation state? So when those kind of topics are on the table, when the beating up of Chagulanyi's supporters are on the table, when the manner in which these predominantly Bahima cattle keepers in Kirhura behaved in such a crude manner in which they were with their sticks pointing at other citizens of the Republic of Uganda, merely campaigning around the states, and police has done nothing. I don't know whether, Judith, you've got any information that any arrests have been made since that incident there. When these are the kind of issues, they get lost away from the real issues. And in Uganda's case, actually, I wish, and of course you are right to ask us about candidate Besigye and which other candidate has really brought up the big issue. I'm really not quite sure. We praised Nandala's manifesto as being thorough from the economist perspective. But I'm not quite sure whether after 40 years it should be confined to that. I think this nation needs a big agenda, and that's why I cry for my party, but I will not go to the UPC thing on it there. Really, the big thing that today we would be talking about, as the nation said, a big candidate. A big candidate should be talking about the big things, the traditional things of health, the traditional things of education, the traditional things of infrastructure, the traditional things of agriculture. And when we had the things of the flooding in Nachivubo, I expected to see all the big candidates come and talk Kampala, talk infrastructure, talk the environment, and side by side with that, you then begin to talk about spends. Where will the money come from? So there you discuss taxation. Then you talk about deficits. And when you talk about deficits, we've been borrowing, but borrowing for what? Where the money has been going. Then you link it up then with corruption. And then when you do that, then maybe you begin to, when you discuss taxation and you're talking about Nachivubo and their poor people, you talk about then possibly tax ceilings. Should we begin to discuss possibilities like in Ochieno's case, where possibly people earning a certain threshold, possibly less than 1 million shillings, do not pay tax, direct taxes as pay as you go, things like that, or not. Those are the big things, in my opinion, that should be discussed. Whether, and I know they're being discussed, but they get lost because of the manner and context of messaging. And maybe that's why I agree with Sarah that maybe an opportunity for a presidential debate may be able to bring this, but a presidential debate is merely one. You have presidential candidates going around the country and they get stuck on roads. You have candidates going around the country, and then you find them stopping over in certain cases. I've had 1 or 2 cases where they're stopping about where people have died because of the basic health, which would be things that would others be provided for. And these are not there. Questions about budget and taxes, how we will balance our budget. The GDP thing that Mr. Museveni should really be priding himself on, say that from 1986, our economy has grown with the alleged gains. But I find it extremely difficult. I saw Sarah discussing some group somewhere with people, man, and people talk about the gains and they say, which gains? Ochieno, I've been trying my level best. I'll even fast one of these days to make sure that I get a revelation of what really are the gains that we should be saying.
But I think I tend to agree with Sarah. I watched that. I think you're referring to the philosophy conference that Makerere University held, where she was one of the keynote speakers. One of the gains I think she highlighted was women, okay? Yeah. How far women have come over the last 30 years or so. There has certainly been incremental gains. I don't know, Sarah, if you could, looking at that, if you could just repeat for perhaps those.
That's not the context I was referring to, but fair enough.
Yeah, I want us to look at the gains from that perspective, because I also want us to be fair to the fact that, yes, it may be doom and gloom everywhere, but where have we also made gains? Where do you think the NRM has made gains under, in the 40 years or so that it has been in power? When it comes to, say, infant mortality, under 5 mortality, maternal mortality, I think the indicators are actually there that these numbers are going down, but certainly we are not where we ought to be. Could you just repeat, for the benefit of our viewers who may not have watched, the gain when it comes to just using the lens of women empowerment and emancipation, and also where the shortfalls are?
I think to be fair generally, if I am 49 years today, it means Museveni has been in power since I was 9.
I'm 49.
If I was doing nothing all my life, I would still have gained weight. I would have added a bit of height because I'm not a baby. I would have grown hair. So really, a person over 80 years, even 40 years, even if you're seated in one space,
there's change. Something is changing, yes.
Yes, so
good or bad, but there's going to be change.
That's largely what NRM is about. Largely. That you can't sit in one place over 40 years and nothing changes. A few things are bound to change. President Museveni came to power with a promise of fundamental change. And before I come to the affirmative action, if I was to say what are the gains, I would go back first. What was the promise? Number one, democracy. Where are we? We started from the challenges of rule of law and fundamental rights and freedoms and violation of the rights of opposition. What marks do we give him? If people want us to score the 40 years of NRM, we can score them systematically and show that even where there is progress, it's not beyond 50%. It's the bare minimum, in my view. We have also to look at the period. If I was supposed to walk home after this show, and I'm expected to be home, but I reach after 2 days, I will have reached home. But was that what I was expected to do? Again, the cost of money spent by President Museveni in power, having benefited from 2 debt waivers, and the debt, the public debt in this country, the vice of corruption he's presiding over, the death of institutions. So on one hand, you have a few things that have worked out. The affirmative action, yes. The global movement of Beijing platform that we endorsed, that is embedded in our constitution. Women in leadership, we have the numbers. We have the highest positions. And we had this conversation today in some of the spaces of the women movement. We have the numbers, the highest numbers, the most important positions held by women. Vice President, Speaker, Prime Minister, all at a go for the first time. But what girl-child agenda has these women fronted in the 5 years? Zero. Zero. Woman Speaker, woman Prime Minister, woman Vice President. We have failed to provide sanitary pads for poor girls in schools. The last Health Perception Index I attended 2 years ago, the rate of teenage pregnancies was at 27, having gone higher than pandemic days when it was at 22. We have children in this country becoming mothers because children are involved in relationships looking for money to buy sanitary pads. You have high rates of girl-child school dropout. We have high rates of teenage mothers. We have high rates of teenage death giving birth. We have child-headed families, children becoming parents and carrying babies and taking care of them. We are producing a lost generation of these school dropouts because of a mere failure to create a stabilizer for a girl from a poor family to avoid stigmatization at school as they start their menstrual periods. And we are reflecting as the women movement. Why have we failed? So when you look at the value of the big women in leadership to the girl child from a poor home, zero. Can the speaker make such conversations? You have her meeting teachers, I will provide this, I will provide that. Can she provide sanitary pads in the budget? The Prime Minister, the head of government business. The other day she was threatening KCCA not to protect the wetland in Achuvubu. Can she debate the situation of teenage mothers and school dropouts in this country? The Vice President, I don't know what policies she has ever advanced. I don't even remember what statements she has ever made. Does she even sit in office? I don't even remember any speech concerning any national issue by the Vice. Do you remember anything?
Well, she represents the president at...
Yeah, but what does she stand for?
What does she say?
We knew what Dr. Kaziwe was standing for. What does the current Vice President stand for? Does anybody know? Zero. So we needed to sit and score. Maybe, Judith, you need to convene us here. And we score these leaders and give them their reports of performance for this term. So, so when you look at these women numbers, 44% in cabinet, but you cannot say to us sanitary pads for poor girls. So what is there for the girl child to celebrate? Yes, we have the girls in schools, we have affirmative action, but how about these ones who are leaving? Because they cannot contain, have their healthy menstrual hygiene in schools. So that's part of, so what is the gain for the girl child? So when you look at other issues, they all have, holes punched in them like this over time. You can say, yes, Makere, we are graduating more numbers in universities. Yes. But what are the jobs? Where's the job market for these girls? Where is it? Do we have absorption measures? Have we grown the economy to give the opportunities for the high numbers of graduation of women and girls? Where do they go? We are again packaging our graduates for slave trade in the Middle East. So is that progress that we should protect under Museveni? That you created affirmative action, girls are graduating, but you don't have anything to do with them, and you are packaging them every day and shipping them into slave trade in the Middle East. Is that a gain that we should protect? So, and the story goes on and on and on. Yes, there are gains over a long time, the cost, the punches. You find that there's a little to write home about.
You certainly agree. Because that's where you were already.
That's basically my argument. But that's genuinely very, very sad. And it's sad that I'll spend a minute on it because it's a narrative which is being very formally pushed by NRM. And since we're talking manifestos, this is the context of the presentation. Again, I saw in a social media space in which a senior military officer is talking extremely partisan politics because they've now come into part of their celebration. Is it Teresita? That thing that I don't want to. That's why I don't want to use. They want to protect the gains. and a part of the argument, part of the debate, and that's why I was suggesting nuances towards Sarah, was that actually to find actually the National Army picking this in such a precise way is not only very partisan, but it's also petty. But it also tells you how shallow some of these spaces are. That of all things, those are the very same words you can actually seek to use. And so then if you want to pick it from that, from the Army's perspective, because he'll go ahead and say that, well, we've been in power for a long time, we've protected the territory, we've beaten, for example.
The Army is a permanent feature of the state. It's a pillar of the state.
In this case, we've beaten maybe rebellion across and we've defeated all of them, which is not necessarily true, But to then go ahead and put in such a manner that is part of the wider national campaign. No, you cannot, on this women thing, the girl child thing, Judith. Only the other day, I was meeting with 3 women, including 2 social workers. And these are social work graduates. Governments, if you want affirmative action beyond Beijing, which started with Nairobi, where this debate started, it's not an NRA thing. This is a global thing. We can give credit to NRA that we're going ahead to implement. But I've also argued in public spaces, these guys have used it almost like in the name of what revolutionary organizations you see, the Gaddafis, they carry girls, whatever, as part of their entourage, whatever, to appear good. But in many cases, some of these are actually abused girls, abused women. So the numbers must be about quality. How much on average, Ugandan women in rural Uganda have got access to clean water, how much they've got access to decent housing, how much they've got access to basic Medicare. You talk about the mortality rate, it can actually be very, 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 very misleading. If you consider the hospitals that have been built that these guys have failed to maintain or sustain, and if you go to any average national public hospital, there is no public hospital without a scandal as we talk today. There is no public hospital that any average Ugandan woman empowered can walk into today with a child or just basically on themselves, get attended to decently, walk out and continue home. And during break, I was discussing with our young producers here how much taxes they pay per month. It's a huge amount of money. So I don't know what. So from that perspective, it doesn't apply. On the educational thing that Sarah is talking about, yes, Makerere. Makerere is not only a slum today, that's my university. In a short period of time in Obotegwan, They built halls of residences and they rounded it up with practical material thing. You could see it. And some of us got the gains and went to our mutual hall that we like to pride about. But if you see the numbers and see what's happening down there, the dilapidation,
The dilapidation
and
of
see
the
the
structures,
condition under
yes.
which young students are surviving on. Now, their number, the mathematics, the figures I was trying to tell you, if our population has grown fourfolds, which it has, you know, the economy has grown allegedly, I'm told, 10 times plus, plus, plus. So basically, unless the economy is able to absorb, you know, the people that they produce, the child from university education, there is a failure somewhere. In any case, this topic is about, you know, campaignings and policies and programs. So there's no reason why you don't draw comparisons elsewhere. Governments around the world, and of course when you take up the Americas, they pick and choose. In America, you know, when you're campaigning, it's about how many jobs you've created per month, you know, how many, what they call housing starts, you know, how much have you invested in infrastructure and by what, how much interest rates, how much on taxations, and how much you've reduced. And by the fellow Ugandans and friends watching these things, those are real economy.
Yes.
Those are the real economy. You know, and unless we're able to discuss those, and by this it doesn't have to be America, because here it happened and it happens before. So again, the other day I was talking to a young sister to a head teacher of a primary school that presented the best people in the country. Mahanga Primary School, I've told you a program here. So in 1972, the best people in the country came from Mahanga Primary School, a local primary school in my place in Nagongara. Today, the whole of Bukedi, I don't know which school will be able to produce a pupil that is able to go ahead and compete with it. Many of these other schools are predominantly private schools, you know? And so even out of the private schools, I don't know how many average citizens can afford. You know, so even this education nonsense, it's been wrapped up in all sorts of propaganda. And I can only say that, look, it's a pity we are here, and it's a pity that the manner in which the campaigns are going on, I don't think really the people who should be held more at account, apart from the other 7 candidates telling what they should do. My promise to them is that if only they focused on the 40 years of NRA failure, maybe it would actually take us somewhere.
Thank you. We just have 5 minutes to wind up this discussion, and I'll now be coming to each of you for your final thoughts. Starting with you, Sarah, if you are to think about perhaps one most critical step that you think should be taken to safeguard the principles of rule of law and also to level the playing field during this campaign season so that we have sanity when we go to vote come January?
I don't know. I don't know for 2 reasons. The Electoral Commission has not given us, when I say us, I mean part of the citizenry, any sign of confidence that they are running a good show. I don't see it. I don't see it when you can't account for events under your control, like nomination. When you can't account for processes that are targeting opponents of big politicians to be eliminated. You can't account for example, and I don't know if Ochieno, since he comes from the political party side, I haven't seen the transparency around procurement of voting materials, of biometric machines, procurement for printing of ballots, procurement. This process is completely opaque. And then when the Electoral Commission comes out to tell the observers that don't observe elections in Kampala and Wakiso, what is the agenda? And then you eliminate long-term election observers, the civil society. What kind of election is being done? And on the other hand, you have the negative signs from the army. The army copying the slogan of NRM, protecting the gains for the Atari Sita, but also giving an irregular order of voters vacating voting areas after voting, as if they are the ones in charge of issuing election guidelines, and the Electoral Commission remains quiet. So I don't think these are signs that would give us confidence that January 15th we will have a clear skyline. I don't think. It seems crowded. The rising violence around opposition, you know, it seems crowded in my view. The way forward for Uganda, people who occupy offices without ability to claim authority of those offices, including judiciary, parliament, the electoral commission,
Thank
maybe
you.
national dialogue.
Thank you. Joseph.
The Electoral Commission did the right thing once. That's when they summoned
Like a dead clock.
UPC leaders on the question of our candidature. And on that, they found that none of us basically met the criteria for qualification for candidate for UPC leadership. But in any case, I was not one of those, but it's stuck on Jim McKenna and Dennis Enap. And of course, that has been run with. They were right because they refer to a judicial process which is pending. So the person who's on test and on trial is basically the judicial system, which is either clogged or they need to be able to answer for themselves. But that said, the Electoral Commission can still do the right thing and to heed some of the advice. In fact, the advice that Sarah is giving, because that's the advice all of us have been giving. I have said that I've met Simon and I consider him a friend. He's a very decent guy when you meet him one-on-one. I don't know what happens, and I know the whole thing is overwhelming. I think Simon Biamukama and his team should be men and women enough to recognize that the burden of responsibility lies with them, but really on behalf of the Republic of Uganda and all of us, the citizens of this country, and not an interest, not a political organization, and certainly not Mr. Museveni. I think, and I addressed them, by the way, Sarah, in that meeting, that 1980 general elections and what sent the Musevenis to the bush, you know, they started with the elections. So, you know, they're on the spot. History has it for them. So Simon can do the decent thing and make sure that under his watch, this election is free and fair, regardless of the outcome of the whole thing. But it's free and fair, and it's seen to have been free and fair. In any case, the majority of the people going to vote are extremely young people whom we massively encourage that they must make sure, please, you guys go out and vote regardless. And while we're discussing whether or not you can stay at the polling station after you go voting, please make sure you go and vote. On the broader question of Africa, I don't know what the answer is. I don't know whether 19 and 20-year-olds should mobilize themselves and learn and go to Frelimo camps like the way the Musevenis did, so that they claim back their republic and face Mr. Museveni said, you went to Frelimo camp, you joined Obote and Nyerere in Dar es Salaam, although you don't praise them enough, and here you are. Why don't you allow us also to do the same thing when systems fail?
Well, thank you very much. I do appreciate the two of you, Dr. Sarah Bireete and you, Mr. Joseph Ochieno, for your insights on this important and critical conversation on the continued detention of Dr. Kizza Besigye and the scores of other political prisoners who are at large, who are in different detention centers, but also on the issues that are defining the campaign trail. Thank you very much. And from our conversation, you clearly see that our democracy continues to face significant tests and constraints, which means we all need to be vigilant. My name is Judith Atim, I'm your host. Thank you very much for being a part of this conversation. The Citizens Chat returns next week, same time. To join us then, but do be a part of the conversation. Drop us a comment in the comment section and also share the content as far as and as wide as you can, and also follow us on our various social platforms, on X, on Facebook, and on TikTok as well. Thank you very much. Join us next week. Bye for now.